All right, week 11, we're dealing with Congress and interbranch politics, the role that Congress plays within the foreign policy process. It's pretty clear the framers intended Congress to have a kind of collaborative role, not necessarily playing a leading role very often, but certainly Congress always has that power of the purse and the power of oversight, and these are things that presidents are often quite aware of and quite wary of as they formulate and conduct foreign policy. I think we've pretty much established that presidents have considerable prerogative power, the power to act fairly decisively and quickly within the realm of foreign policy. But Congress has the power to raise the costs of that kind of action. Uh, Congress also has a role to play in terms of determining funding for these kinds of things, and so that's an important thing to keep in mind. The Senate has advice and consent powers on a lot of things that presidents would want to do. The courts play a significant role, and I think you'll see the two very important Supreme Court cases that kind of set up kind of a zone of authority for the president, both with the Curtis Wright case and with the Youngstown Steel case, and how those cases were decided really kind of demonstrates, again, on the one hand, that presidents do have power and they are constitutionally considered to be the preeminent actor in foreign policy, but that power is not unlimited, and that presidents trying to intrude into private ownership decisions or the workings of the economy are going to find themselves more constrained than they would otherwise. Um, this chapter talks a lot about patterns of interaction, that we have had periods where presidents and Congress have been on the same page and have worked cooperatively with one another very effectively. Certainly during World War II, that was the case. We have also had instances where presidents and Congress were working at considerable odds with one another, where there was high levels of mistrust. And certainly in the Vietnam War era, that was certainly the case. I think we may be entering that sort of a period now. Certainly Obama and Republicans in Congress did not have a very good relationship, and that had a significant impact on, for example, Obama's red line speech. One of the things that I've said in class is one of the biggest mistakes that Obama made was issuing that red line, to Syria, saying that if you step over this line, if you use chemical weapons, I will act. And then the problem, of course, that he faced was that Congress simply did not back him on that threat, and so he did not feel comfortable carrying it out. Um, Certainly, the Cold War played an enormous role in terms of structuring the relationship between Congress and the president. Presidents were greatly strengthened by the Cold War, by the presumption that we were confronting an existential threat, a rival that could end our existence. And so that's certainly been an important factor, and at the end of the Cold War played a very important role in the evolution of this relationship between the president and Congress. The war on terror has played an enormous role, has had an enormous influence, as certainly George W. Bush early in his administration had a considerable amount of latitude to act, but that latitude was, found itself constrained after 2006, when Republicans lost control of Congress, largely again owing to the fact uh, that of how they handled, the war on terror. Um, Congress has a considerable amount of influence over four broad areas that this text talks about: war powers, the advice and consent powers vis-a-vis appointments and treaties. I think, you know, Trump's recent naming of John Bolton to be National Security Advisor may find that there are some headwinds due to the fact that Bolton, had a pretty active role in the 2016 election in activities that a lot of Democrats are going to find problems with. I don't believe that appointment is subject to advise and consent, but it still nevertheless may find problems. Uh, the power of the purse, Congress raises, Congress, especially the House, is responsible for funding foreign policy, and that can become controversial over time. And then, of course, you have important oversight powers that have periodically been used to both highlight, support for policies, but also to marshal opposition. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff in this chapter, and I hope you learn a lot over the course of the week. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, if you're confused about anything, you can email me, but of course, probably you can also ask me a question in the forums, and I always try to monitor those and answer when I can. So let's learn a lot this week, and let's get to it.